Dumb inventions that people actually use. The Hug Me pillow was designed for people who miss their partners. Its shape stimulates half of the upper back of a human and an arm to cuddle with. One of the sillier inventions that are actually really popular are cutters. They make cutters for avocados, strawberries, bananas, and even boiled eggs. The egg cracker has become really popular. It's a pretty simple machine. You just place the egg inside, press the device, and it cracks the shell. The toothpaste dispenser is something that lots of people didn't know they needed until it came out. You just put your toothbrush in the opening, a little bit of toothpaste comes out, and that's it. The ostrich pillow's design promises that you'll have a very comfortable nap. Basically, you just put your head inside the pillow, and depending on what position you're lying in, you could also put your hands inside. 3 people who beat the system. A lady from Vancouver spotted her stolen bike for sale online. She phoned the police, but they were busy that day and couldn't help her. So she decided to call the thief and say she was interested in buying the bike. They met at McDonald's and she immediately knew that it was hers. So she asked to try it out and he agreed and she never came back. Kimberly Oakley left a note for her son Jason saying, "Can you hang this out please?" But she didn't specify what this meant. So Jason took her words more serious than she thought he would and literally hung up the note and sent her this picture. Now before I tell you about the smartest kid, I found an app that gives you these secret emojis and also a bunch of cool fonts. Just press a button on my profile to get it. Finally, this kid's mom has simple rules. No food in the living room and no technology in the kitchen. So the boy beat the system by laying in between the two. People who got stuck in the strangest places. Jamie Bracken Murphy was a young Irish boy who got stuck in a stuffed animal vending machine. He wanted to grab one of the toys so he went in the machine but couldn't get out. Thankfully it was easy for them to get him out and he was only in there for a couple minutes. A man named Cato Larson got stuck in a toilet while trying to get his friend's phone out. He didn't just reach his hand in, he went all the way in the toilet and he couldn't get out. He couldn't find his phone either to call for help. He stayed there for an hour until he was freed by firefighters, who had to break the toilet to get him out. Finally, a woman named Rosie decided to get into a washing machine for a TikTok, but her legs got stuck so she had to call someone for help to get her out. She tried calling her friends first but they couldn't, so she ended up having to get help from the fire department. Tricks that cops don't want you to know. In lots of countries, police are allowed to tell lies, if necessary, to obtain information they believe may be relevant. You have the right to record as long as you're not under arrest. You can also ask for identification, and they can force you to erase the video without a warrant. The requests an officer makes to you aren't in order. For example, if they don't have a warrant to search your car, then it's within your rights to refuse. But it's better to let them do it if you have nothing to hide, because you'll most likely be detained until they get a warrant. The best thing to do when dealing with the police is to act calmly, because if you're nervous or have a defensive attitude, it'll keep them on their toes and the situation may become more difficult. Finally, police officers may use false evidence to try and trick you into admitting the crime. For example, they may use a fake lie detector on a suspect to try and get them to admit or not admit the crime that they are being charged with. Homeowners who spent a fortune just for revenge. A couple that was in the process of a divorce in the 1920s made an agreement where the husband had to build a house for her that was identical to the house they were living in, but she didn't specify the place where she wanted it. So the man had it built in a saltwater marsh that was in the middle of nowhere. In a Seattle neighborhood, neighbors got into an argument about a small plot of land. The owner of the land was approached by his neighbor who offered him a small amount of money for the land so he could grow a garden. For some reason, the landowner was so offended that he built a house. In the end, the neighbor moved because the house obstructed his view. In Argentina, Karina Cavana was rejected from her partner's mother. So in revenge, she set out to build a house that would obstruct the view of the Basilica of the Blessed Sacrament from the home of the family that rejected her. Dark secrets you didn't know about SeaWorld. SeaWorld is home to orcas who were kidnapped from the ocean, but the stories they tell about their captures are way different from what actually happened. For example, one of the stories they tell is that one of the orcas, which they named Tillicum, was rescued when she was 2 years old because she was injured in the ocean. But the truth is that she was taken away from her natural habitat against her will and given to SeaWorld for exhibition. The dolphins in the park suffer from stress caused by the contact they have with humans, which prevents them from feeding, resting, and taking care of their babies. Even though this information is supported by studies done at the University of Newcastle, they continue to let the public touch them. Finally, all the animals suffer from terrible consequences from overcrowding and unnatural living conditions. For example, the whales live in spaces that would be equivalent to us living in a bathtub, which doesn't allow them to swim enough to stay healthy, and you could tell by their collapsed dorsal fins. But SeaWorld claims that it's a natural condition. People who had one job but still failed. This person put up a sign saying give cyclists space, but it blocks off the bike lane. This person gave the baker a flash drive with the picture they wanted on the cake, but instead the baker put a picture of the flash drive. On the news, they were supposed to blur out the people in the background's faces, but you could still see them perfectly fine in the mirror. This person's job is to cut the grass, but they're too lazy to move the pylon. Now before I show you the most funniest one, I found an app that scans your palm and tells you your future. Just press the button on my profile profile to get it. Finally, this person put a drain in the only spot that doesn't get water. So I guess it's working, right? Mysterious photos that can't be explained. In this photo, if you look behind this man's head, you can see a shadow behind him. The face of the shadow belongs to Air Force pilot Freddie Jackson, who had passed away and his funeral had taken place a few hours before. In this photo of students, you can see a hand that doesn't belong to any one of them. And although they thought it was a joke, many people think it was paranormal activity. This photo was taken on a bridge in Oakville, Kentucky. The shadow appears to be of a woman walking, and coincidentally, there's a story that a soldier murdered his wife and child near this location. After a family dinner, Mr. Cooper took this picture to remember. But when they looked at it, they seen a strange figure hanging from their ceiling. 5 animals that can kill themselves. Sometimes the horns of rams and goats grow so curved and big that they penetrate their skull, causing their death. Horses and donkeys can suffer from abnormal growth in their hooves. If their hooves aren't trimmed, they can no longer walk because of the pain, causing them to die from starvation. When turtles fall on their back, it's really hard for them to roll back over. When this happens, they usually die from too much sun, starvation, or attacks from another animal. During mating season, deers get into such aggressive fights with each other that their antlers get stuck together to the point where they can't be untied. When this happens and no one can separate them, the deer die because they're unable to eat. Finally, the deer pig is famous for its 2 upper tusks. The growth becomes so uncontrollable that it pierces the upper part of their jaw, and in some cases when they're really big, they could pierce their skull, causing their death. Prisoners who escaped prison and were never found. Clarence Anglin, John Anglin, and Frank Morris are the only 3 prisoners who managed to escape Alcatraz prison in 1962. Because the prison is on an island, they probably died in the icy waters of San Francisco, but their bodies were never found. Sharon Kin murdered 3 people and was sentenced to life imprisonment in the 1960s. After 13 years in a Mexican prison, she managed to escape thanks to a blackout. To this day, her arrest warrant is one of the longest in US history. John Patrick Hannon and Gwyneth Thomas escaped from the Verne prison in England. They used several knotted sheets to climb over a wall, and within a few hours, Thomas was captured. But Hannon has been free for 66 years and is considered one of the most successful escapees. The craziest things found by airport security. In an Amsterdam airport, 200 bags of tarantulas were found. In 2015, a child was found in a suitcase that belonged to a 19-year-old girl traveling from Morocco to Spain. A couple from India were arrested at the airport for smuggling small bars of pure gold that they glued to their feet. At Shanghai airport, they opened a suitcase that contained live snakes, and in total there was 121 of them. 2 women were arrested at Liverpool airport for attempting to transport the body of a dead relative in a wheelchair. And finally, a tiger cub was found in the suitcase of a Thai woman traveling to Iran. She tried to make them think it was a stuffed animal because there were other stuffed animals in the suitcase. But in the end, the woman was arrested and the tiger was taken for special care. The scariest booby traps in the world. Punji sticks were one of the most famous booby traps used in the Vietnam War. It was made out of bamboo sticks with a sharp point at the end, which were placed in deep holes that they camouflaged so nobody could see them. The goal is that the enemy would fall into the pit and the punchy sticks would pierce them. Cartridge traps, also known as toe poppers, were bullet cartridges that were placed inside a bamboo tube and a nail which they camouflaged into the ground with the tip protruding. When stepped on, the pressure of the bullet caused it to fall on the nail, igniting the primer and exploding. Finally, when the Germans were retreating from the cities of Europe, they made sure to place expensive works of art with explosives that would go off with the slightest movement. The trick was to leave the paintings slightly tilted so that when they were straightened, they would explode. Fake beggars who got caught. A man in Colombia pretended to have a leg injury so people would give him money. He collected about $200 from people driving by, but one day the police offered to help him with medical equipment, but he refused. So they looked into it and it turns out he was lying. A beggar in China pretended to have 2 legs amputated. He moved around in this little vehicle where he crawled with his hands. But one day a man took off his pants to expose him, and it turned out he had both legs. 5 years ago, a pregnant woman from America who begged for money every day on the streets with her child was caught after someone taking a picture of her driving a Mercedes-Benz, and while she counted the money with a smile on her face. Dark secrets that zoos don't want you to know. Zoo pens are a possible source of salmonella, E. coli, and many other diseases, so be careful when touching the animals. Some animals can suffer from zoonosis, which they get from being held in a zoo that causes them to tick, groom excessively, and make them anxious. And to control it, they give them medication. When zoos have too many animals in very little space, they give them pills to prevent them from having babies, or they sacrifice them at birth. The food given to animals isn't always the best. In many cases, they're given processed foods, and animals like tigers who only eat meat develop dental problems and become anxious because they can't hunt. Finally, it's 50 times more expensive to keep an elephant in a zoo than to let it run free. Photos with disturbing backstories. This photo was taken in 1986, just before NASA sent these 7 explorers into space on the Space Shuttle Challenger. However, a few seconds before takeoff, the shuttle exploded and killed the explorers. To this day, it's unknown if Princess Diana died from an accident or if someone planned it. This photo was taken in Paris just before the crash that caused her death. In 2015, this plane from TransAsia Airways crashed in Taiwan minutes after this photo was taken. The plane was carrying 58 passengers and ended up crashing into the the Keelung River. The pilot said he pulled back the throttle on the wrong side and accidentally shut off the only working engine. This error resulted in 43 deaths and 15 injuries. This photo was taken in Thailand in 2004, right before an earthquake caused a tsunami that reached 100 feet high, and more than 200,000 people died. Gadgets that give you superpowers. MYO is a bracelet made by Telmic Labs. It allows you to control your electronics with simple gestures. The sensors detect the movements in your arm muscles, and some of its functions are you can control the volume of your music, you can control drones, and you could also play games without the joystick. If you've ever wanted to throw fire with your hands, you can with the Pyro Mini Flamethrower. You put it on your wrist and it lets you throw sparks, flames, and fireballs. It does this by quickly burning tissue. The exoskeleton is a full bodysuit. It has integrated weapons, it's bulletproof, it increases your mobility and strength by taking the stress off your joints and muscles, which even allows people in wheelchairs to stand up and walk. Animals that saved human lives. A parent named Willie saved a 2-year-old girl from choking on her food. The girl's babysitter went to the bathroom when she suddenly heard the parrot yelling, "Mommy, baby," while flapping its wings. She quickly ran to the kitchen where the girl was and saw that she had blue lips. So she began doing abdominal compressions. Thankfully it worked and opened up her airway, saving her life thanks to the parrot. In Ethiopia, a 12-year-old girl was kidnapped by 4 men on her way to school. 3 lions appeared and scared the kidnappers away. Then they stayed with her until the police found where she was. Debbie Parkhurst, a 45-year-old from America, was saved by her golden retriever dog named Toby when she was choking on an apple that she had taken a bite out of. Toby started jumping on top of her and managed to pull out the piece of apple that was stuck in her throat. Miracles people claim to have caught on tape. On Route 385 in Memphis, Tennessee, a driver lost control of his Jeep and went off the road. The car was immediately engulfed with flames. The driver escaped unharmed, but the curious thing is the police found a Bible that was untouched by the fire. It was perfectly fine even though the car was almost in ashes. In the Philippines, a little girl woke up at her funeral. Apparently she was ill and had a high fever which caused her to go into a coma, but the doctors didn't know that and declared her dead the day before her funeral. But luckily her relatives found out in time. Prahlad Jani was a Hindu ascetic who claimed he hadn't eaten or drank anything in over 70 years. Specialists in the scientific department put him in hospital for 15 days under 24-hour supervision and claimed he hadn't eaten or drank anything in those 15 days. According to the man, this can be achieved by meditation and a divine blessing. 5 everyday things that prove our life is a lie. Mini carrots sold in supermarkets aren't really that size. They're cut to look like that and more noticeable to the eye. Hair doesn't grow thicker if you cut it or shave it. Many people think this because the tip that's left is blunt, which makes it appear to be thicker until it's finished growing. The taste of Coca-Cola changes when it's packaged in cans. The only container that it doesn't change taste is in glass, because it's chemically inert, which means that it doesn't affect the product. The gold medals in the Olympics aren't only made of gold. They're made of pure silver that's plated in gold, so they only actually contain about 1.34% of gold, which would be equivalent to 6 grams. Finally, for the longest time, people have been using bricks for their walls because it's sturdy, but nowadays companies can make anything look like brick walls. So if it looks like this, it may not be as sturdy as you think. Facts you think are lies but are actually true. The Italian term spaghetti, used to name a type of pasta, is plural, and if you want to refer to a single piece of pasta in a package, the correct term is spaghettio. Columbus Day is celebrated in the United States on the 2nd Monday of October. But the truth is, Columbus never set foot in the United States. Man stepped on the moon before wheeled suitcases were made. Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon in 1969, and suitcases with wheels were created in 1972. Clouds in the sky may look really light, but depending on the size, they weigh about a ton. The military uses dogs to detect bombs, thanks to their scenting abilities, which is really useful for ground operations. But what many people don't know is that the Navy trains and uses dolphins to detect bombs at sea and even attack enemy ships.